The bustling airport terminal hummed with life. A symphony of rushing travelers, rolling suitcases, and the distant announcements of flight departures. Among the sea of faces, Marcus Walker stood out, a tall, well-dressed black man in his early 40s, exuding an air of calm confidence as he navigated the chaos around him. His tailored suit spoke of success, while the leather carry-on bag slung over his shoulder hinted at the life of a seasoned traveler. As he approached the first-class boarding line, he adjusted his grip on the bag, momentarily revealing the worn pilot's license tucked neatly into his side pocket. The familiar scent of jet fuel and freshly brewed coffee enveloped him, a comforting reminder of countless flights and the skies he loved. He took a deep breath, ready to embark on what he anticipated would be just another routine flight. At the front of the line stood Emily, a flight attendant whose pristine uniform was marred by a narrow-eyed look of disapproval as she spotted Marcus. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and bright red lipstick seemed to emphasize her disdain as she pursed her lips, a thin line of judgment forming between them. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you sure you're in the right line? Economy boarding is over there." She gestured dismissively behind her, a smug smile curling at the corners of her mouth. Marcus met her gaze steadily, his expression neutral but firm. He felt the eyes of other passengers upon him, their curious glances igniting an unwelcome tension in his chest. Without a word, he held out his boarding pass, a small act of defiance against the undercurrent of prejudice that threatened to wash over him. Emily snatched the pass from his hand, her manicured nails clicking against the paper as she scanned it. Her eyes widened briefly, but instead of acknowledging her mistake, she settled into a scowl. "I see," she said curtly, thrusting the pass back at him. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Walker." As Marcus moved past her, he caught her mutter under her breath. "I guess they're letting anyone fly first class these days." The words hung in the air, sharp and stinging. For a fleeting moment, he paused, shoulders tense with indignation. But then he shook his head slightly, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a response. He was here to relax, not to engage in a battle of wills with a flight attendant whose mind was clearly closed. Behind him, a group of flight attendants gathered near the gate desk, watching the exchange unfold. A young man with kind eyes leaned toward his colleague, frowning. "Did you see that? Emily's way out of line." The woman beside him shrugged, glancing nervously toward Emily. "It's not our place to say anything. You know how she can be." Just a few feet away, two male attendants exchanged knowing glances, poorly concealing their amusement. One of them snickered, quickly muffling it with a cough as Emily turned her head. As Marcus stepped onto the plane, the familiar scent of leather and polished wood washed over him. He breathed deeply, momentarily letting the discomfort fade. This was his domain, the cockpit, the skies above. He had spent countless hours in cockpits just like this one. But today was different. Today, he would be merely a passenger, his skills cloaked beneath the surface. He found his seat easily, stowing his bag in the overhead compartment, and settled into the plush leather. The gentle hum of the engines provided a sense of calm as he closed his eyes, letting out a long breath. But even in this oasis of comfort, the curious glances from other passengers did not escape him. He could sense the undercurrents of judgment, the whispers of assumptions based solely on appearances. As the flight settled into its cruise, the seatbelt sign dinged off and the cabin crew began their in-flight service. Emily emerged from the galley, pushing a cart laden with drinks and snacks. Her demeanor shifted, bright and cheerful, as she approached the first row of first-class passengers, a stark contrast to her earlier behavior. "Good afternoon. What can I get for you today?" she asked. Her voice honeyed as she addressed an elderly couple seated across the aisle. Marcus watched the interaction, his face impassive, steeling himself for what he knew was coming. As she approached his row, the smile evaporated, replaced by a look of barely concealed disdain. Without a word, she placed a napkin on his tray table, followed by a plastic cup of water. The abruptness of the movement caused some of the water to spill over the rim, leaving small droplets on the tray. "Thank you," Marcus said politely, reaching for the cup. Emily's only response was a derisive snort as she turned away, moving on to the next passenger without even making eye contact. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin grew increasingly tense, punctuated by Emily's voice as she chatted amiably with other passengers, her tone warm and engaging. Marcus felt the weight of the moment, the disparity in treatment impossible to ignore. As he sat there, he reflected on his journey, the challenges he had faced in a world that often judged by skin color rather than skill. But today, he wouldn't let Emily's prejudice diminish him. He was more than her narrow-minded assumptions, he was a skilled pilot. A man of experience. Just as he was beginning to center himself, the calm of the cabin shattered. The plane lurched violently, caught in unexpected turbulence, sending gasps rippling through the passengers. Marcus's instincts kicked in, and he tightened his seatbelt, assessing the situation with the keen awareness of a seasoned pilot. Something felt off, and deep down, he knew this flight was about to take a turn he never anticipated. What started as an ordinary flight was evolving into a test of character and resilience, both for him and for everyone on board. Little did they know, the journey ahead would change their lives forever. The plane settled into its cruising altitude, the initial turbulence fading into a gentle sway as the engines hummed steadily beneath Marcus Walker. He leaned back in his seat, allowing the plush leather to embrace him, closing his eyes for a brief moment of reprieve. But the tranquility was short-lived. Emily's earlier dismissive behavior replayed in his mind like a relentless loop, taunting him with memories of prejudice and assumptions. With a slow breath, Marcus opened his eyes and glanced around the cabin. Passengers were engaging in quiet conversations, some flipping through magazines, while others gazed out the windows at the cloud-draped world below. Yet, he could feel the undercurrent of tension, the subtle shift in energy as people exchanged glances, some filled with curiosity, others steeped in discomfort. It was a familiar dance, one he had encountered many times before. Just as he was about to immerse himself in a novel tucked in his bag, Emily reappeared, pushing her cart down the aisle with an air of feigned cheerfulness. The earlier warmth she had displayed to other passengers was nowhere to be found. Her smile seemed forced, her eyes flickering away from Marcus as if she feared acknowledging him. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" she asked. Her tone clipped as she stood by his row, clearly wishing to get the encounter over with as quickly as possible. "Yes, actually," Marcus replied, his voice calm yet firm. "Could I have a coffee, please?" Emily hesitated, her brow furrowing ever so slightly before she turned away, heading back to the galley without another word. Marcus's gaze followed her, and he caught the eye of Alex, the younger flight attendant he had noticed earlier. Alex wore a concerned expression, as if he could sense the tension lingering in the air. As Emily busied herself behind the galley, Marcus leaned forward, catching Alex's attention. "Hey, I appreciate you checking in earlier," he said quietly, keeping his voice low enough not to disturb other passengers. Alex nodded, stepping closer. "I'm really sorry about how Emily treated you. It was out of line." "You didn't deserve that," he said earnestly, glancing back at Emily, who was engaged in conversation with another crew member, her demeanor still visibly strained. "Thank you," Marcus replied, feeling a sense of solidarity in Alex's words. "I've dealt with my fair share of ignorance before, but it's different when it happens in a confined space like this. It's frustrating." Alex shifted on his feet, his brow creasing with concern. "I know it's tough. I've seen her act this way before, but I never thought she'd go that far. I wish I could do something more." "Sometimes just acknowledging it helps," Marcus said, appreciating the sincerity in Alex's voice. "Thank you for not turning a blind eye." Before Alex could respond, Emily returned, coffee in hand, and placed it in front of Marcus with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Here you go. Enjoy," she said, her voice barely concealing her irritation. "Thank you," Marcus replied evenly, meeting her gaze with calm determination. Emily moved on quickly, the corners of her lips tightening as she interacted with the other first-class passengers. Marcus sipped his coffee, letting the rich warmth seep into him, offering a moment of comfort amidst the mounting tension. He could feel the eyes of the elderly couple across the aisle on him, their expressions a mix of sympathy and concern. As the flight progressed, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. Whispers of discontent grew louder, and murmurs of disbelief at Emily's behavior circulated among the passengers. Marcus's resolve strengthened with each passing moment. He wouldn't allow a narrow-minded individual to dictate how he felt or how he experienced this flight. Suddenly, the plane jolted again, this time more violently than before. The overhead compartments rattled ominously, and passengers gasped, gripping their armrests tightly. Marcus instinctively tightened his seatbelt, the pilot within him alert and assessing. Something was off. This was not ordinary turbulence. A tense voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your co-pilot speaking. We're experiencing some turbulence, but it should pass shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The words did little to calm the rising panic in the cabin. Marcus glanced toward the front, his instincts telling him to pay close attention. He noticed a flight attendant, her face pale with worry, rushing towards the galley. huddling closely with Emily and Alex. The hushed tones of their conversation reached Marcus's ears, his heart racing as he strained to catch the details. "The captain has collapsed," the attendant whispered urgently. "He's unresponsive. And the co-pilot is struggling to handle everything." Marcus's heart sank, and the reality of the situation hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just turbulence anymore, it was a crisis. And he knew he had to act. Without a second thought, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, his movements smooth and purposeful. "Excuse me," he called to the group of flight attendants, his voice calm but authoritative. "I couldn't help overhearing. I'm a pilot, I have experience handling emergencies like this. Let me help." Emily looked at him with disbelief, her disdain bubbling back to the surface despite the dire circumstances. "You," she scoffed. But before she could continue, Marcus stepped closer, the urgency of the situation piercing through her skepticism. "I assure you, I'm no amateur. Every moment we waste here puts everyone on this plane at greater risk," he said, his voice steady and firm. Around them, the passengers who had overheard began to murmur, some calling out in support of Marcus. "If he's a pilot, what are you waiting for? Let him help." The rising panic seemed to sway Emily as she hesitated, caught between her prejudice and the immediate need for assistance. But it was Alex who acted first, rushing to the intercom. "Co-pilot, this is Alex from the cabin crew. We have a passenger who says he's an experienced pilot. Should we send him up there?" "Send him immediately," came the co-pilot's strained voice over the intercom. Hope surged in Marcus as Alex turned to him, urgency lighting up his eyes. "Please follow me." As Marcus followed Alex toward the cockpit, he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was more than just a flight, it was an opportunity to prove that determination and skill could overcome ignorance and prejudice. He was ready to show everyone on this plane that despite their assumptions, he belonged here. With each step, he felt the tension in the cabin transform into something potent, an unspoken hope that things would get better. As he reached the cockpit door, he steeled himself for what lay ahead, knowing that the journey had just begun. As Marcus Walker stepped into the cockpit, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air was thick with urgency and tension. The co-pilot, a young man with sweat beading on his brow, turned to Marcus with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Thank God you're here," he said, his voice shaky but grateful. "The captain collapsed without warning. I've been trying to keep everything stable, but I could use all the help I can get." Marcus nodded, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "Let's get a handle on this. What's our current altitude and heading?" As the co-pilot relayed the information, Marcus took his place in the empty seat, his fingers instinctively moving across the controls. Years of training kicked in, and he assessed the readings with a practiced eye. "We need to stabilize our flight path first," he instructed, his voice calm and authoritative. "Let's reduce our altitude a bit to avoid the turbulence while we figure out our next steps." Meanwhile, back in the cabin, Emily was trying to maintain her composure, moving through the aisles with an air of forced professionalism. Passengers were whispering amongst themselves, the tension palpable as the plane shook intermittently. Her earlier bravado had faltered, replaced by the reality of the situation unfolding above. As Emily offered drinks and snacks to the first-class passengers, she noticed their expressions, a mix of concern and confusion. Whispers of disbelief about the captain's collapse began to ripple through the cabin, and she felt the eyes of the passengers on her, judging her every move. Her heart raced, not from the adrenaline of the situation, but from the fear of her earlier behavior coming back to haunt her. "Good afternoon, everyone. How's everything going?" She attempted to sound upbeat, but her voice faltered as she faced a couple seated near the front. The elderly woman frowned at her. "How can you ask that when we just heard the captain collapsed? What are you doing to help?" The question hung in the air, and Emily's stomach churned. She could feel the judgmental glares piercing through her facade. "We're handling it," she replied, her voice clipped. Before moving on, desperate to escape the questioning, a few rows back, Marcus was now working seamlessly with the co-pilot, his demeanor commanding as they communicated over the intercom. "This is Flight 237 declaring an emergency. We need to prepare for an unscheduled landing. Can you relay that to air traffic control?" As Marcus took charge, the cabin buzzed with a renewed sense of hope. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, their earlier fears transforming into a collective anticipation. They could feel the calm resolve emanating from the cockpit, reassuring them that they were in capable hands. Emily returned to the galley, her mind racing. She overheard snippets of conversations among her fellow flight attendants discussing the gravity of the situation. "Did you hear? A passenger is helping in the cockpit. He's a pilot," one of them exclaimed. her voice filled with awe. Emily's heart sank at the realization that she had underestimated Marcus entirely. The man she had dismissed was now their only hope. She thought back to her earlier actions. The way she had judged him solely by his appearance. And guilt washed over her like a wave. "Emily, can you grab me some towels?" one of the flight attendants called from the galley, jolting her from her thoughts. She moved mechanically, grabbing the towels and bringing them back to the co-pilot. As she approached, she caught a glimpse of Marcus through the cockpit door, his focus unwavering as he handled the controls with deft precision. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked the co-pilot, her voice wavering slightly. "Yeah," he replied, trying to reassure her. But the uncertainty was evident in his eyes. "Marcus is incredible. He's taking charge up there." Those words struck a chord within Emily, igniting a flicker of hope. "I should have never treated him the way I did," she muttered under her breath, shame flooding her system. As Marcus continued to communicate with air traffic control, directing the plane toward a nearby airport, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was what he had trained for. And now he had the chance to prove himself, not just to the passengers but to himself. 2. Tower. This is Flight 237. We're requesting emergency landing clearance. We have an incapacitated pilot and are currently stabilizing the flight," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Flight 237, you are cleared to land at Newark Liberty International Airport. Emergency vehicles are standing by," the tower responded, calm and professional. "Thank you, Tower. We'll be on the ground shortly," Marcus replied, a sense of relief washing over him. He turned to the co-pilot, who looked visibly more relaxed. "Let's brief the cabin crew. They need to prepare the passengers." As they relayed the situation to the crew, the gravity of what had happened began to settle in the cabin. Emily could feel the tension shift. Passengers began to acknowledge each other, exchanging knowing glances, as if a collective bond was forming in the face of uncertainty. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your co-pilot speaking. Due to a medical emergency, we will be making an unscheduled landing at Newark Liberty International Airport in approximately 25 minutes. Please follow all instructions from the cabin crew for the emergency landing procedure," the co-pilot announced, his tone steady. A murmur of surprise rippled through the cabin. But there was an undercurrent of resilience as passengers exchanged supportive words. Emily, still processing her earlier actions, felt an unexpected swell of camaraderie among the passengers. "Are we going to be okay?" an elderly man asked, his voice shaky but laced with determination. "We're going to be just fine," Emily found herself replying, her tone softening. It was a promise she hoped to keep, one that resonated with the passengers. As she moved back through the cabin, she caught a glimpse of Marcus in the cockpit, his concentration unwavering as he prepared for the landing. The tension that had gripped her earlier began to dissolve, replaced by a deep respect for the man she had once dismissed. Just as she reached her row, a young woman near the front of the cabin caught her eye. "Thank you for your hard work," she said, her voice sincere. "It means a lot right now." Emily felt a swell of warmth at the unexpected kindness. Maybe, just maybe, she could redeem herself in this moment. Maybe the narrative of her day could shift from one of prejudice to one of growth. As the plane descended, the sound of the engines reverberated through the cabin. And with each passing moment, Marcus Walker's quiet confidence filled the space. A reminder that the most important journeys often unfold in the face of adversity. In that moment, Emily understood the true weight of her actions. The flight was more than just a journey from point A to point B, it was a testament to resilience, unity, and the power of second chances. And as they prepared to land, she vowed to confront her biases and embrace the lessons of humility and respect that this experience had ignited within her. The cabin was alive with tension as the plane descended through the clouds. The gentle hum of the engines now tinged with an undercurrent of urgency. Marcus Walker's focus remained razor-sharp in the cockpit, where he and the co-pilot, Chris, worked seamlessly together to navigate the unfolding emergency. The words of the tower still echoed in his mind, "You are cleared to land at Newark Liberty International Airport." Outside, dark clouds loomed ominously, mirroring the anxiety brewing within the cabin. As they approached the airport, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. He had faced emergencies before, but this was different. This wasn't just about him, it was about everyone on board. "Chris, let's review our landing procedures," Marcus said, his voice steady as he adjusted the throttle and began the descent. He glanced at the instruments, noting the altitude and speed. Everything was falling into place, but the unease in the pit of his stomach lingered. "Got it," Chris replied, visibly grateful for Marcus's presence. We'll need to brief the cabin crew on the emergency landing procedures as well. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, Emily moved quickly, her earlier doubts replaced by a fierce determination. The announcement from Chris had transformed the atmosphere among the passengers, who now exchanged anxious glances, some whispering reassurances to one another. The elderly couple who had earlier expressed concern approached Emily as she passed, their expressions a mix of fear and hope. "Is everything going to be all right?" the elderly woman asked, her voice trembling slightly. Emily took a deep breath, summoning her resolve. "Yes. We're going to land safely. The crew is handling everything." She offered a small smile, attempting to instill a sense of calm, even as her own heart raced. As she moved further down the aisle, she overheard snippets of conversation, passengers expressing both concern and curiosity. "Do you think it was serious?" one young man asked, glancing toward the cockpit door. "Whatever it is. It's good to know we have a pilot in charge," an older man replied, nodding in Marcus's direction. "I saw him earlier, he seemed very composed." Emily felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had judged Marcus based solely on her prejudices, and now she saw how deeply flawed that perspective had been. He was a skilled pilot, and he had taken charge when it mattered most. As she reached the galley, she saw Alex, the younger flight attendant who had shown kindness to Marcus. He was busy preparing for the emergency landing, organizing the safety equipment and ensuring everything was in place. "Emily, we need to be ready for the passengers," he said, his eyes serious. "Let's get the cabin secure." "Right," she replied, feeling a new sense of camaraderie with Alex. They worked quickly, securing loose items and demonstrating the brace position to the passengers. The sound of the engines shifted, the vibrations intensifying as the plane entered a patch of turbulence. Emily steadied herself against the galley counter, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're almost there," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Marcus's hands danced over the controls, adjusting the plane's altitude and monitoring the weather conditions. "We're approaching Newark," he said to Chris, his tone authoritative. "Let's prepare for final approach." "Copy that," Chris replied, his fingers racing across the radio as he communicated with the tower. "Flight 237, on final approach. We're preparing for emergency landing." As they neared the runway, Marcus's instincts kicked in. He felt every shift of the aircraft, every gust of wind that threatened to throw them off course. "Focus on the runway lights," he instructed Chris. "Keep us steady." In the cabin, the passengers' anxiety grew palpable. Emily moved down the aisle again, offering comfort where she could. "You're all doing great," she reassured a group of young mothers who were nervously clutching their children. "Just remember to follow our instructions." Suddenly, the plane lurched again, caught in another wave of turbulence. Gasps echoed throughout the cabin, and a few passengers tightened their grip on their armrests. Emily steadied herself, her heart racing as she caught sight of Marcus through the cockpit door. He looked calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your co-pilot speaking. Please prepare for landing. We appreciate your cooperation during this emergency," Chris announced, his voice steady but filled with urgency. Marcus focused intently on the runway, guiding the plane through the final approach. "Gear down," he commanded, and Chris complied, the hydraulic whine of the landing gear deploying filling the cockpit. 500 feet, Chris called, reading from the altimeter. 400, 300. Marcus's hands tightened around the controls, every muscle in his body attuned to the moment. "Flaps set. Stabilizing descent," he replied, his voice steady. 150, 40, 30, 20. With a gentle bump, the wheels touched down on the runway. A collective sigh of relief rippling through the cabin as the passengers processed the reality of their safe landing. "Deploying spoilers," Marcus said, his focus unwavering as he engaged the thrust reversers. The roar of the engines filled the cabin, and the plane decelerated rapidly, slowing to a stop at the designated gate. A wave of applause erupted from the passengers, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief as they realized they were safe. Emily felt tears pricking at her eyes, a mix of relief and pride swelling within her. As the cockpit door swung open, Marcus stepped out, met by the passengers' thankful expressions. He felt the weight of their gratitude wash over him, a reminder that this journey was about more than just flying, it was about humanity and connection. "Thank you. Thank you," a young mother exclaimed, tears streaming down her face as she approached him with her child. "You saved us." Marcus nodded, a modest smile crossing his face. "We did it together," he replied, his heart swelling with the recognition that he had overcome not just an emergency, but the biases that threatened to define him. As the emergency crew arrived to assist the unconscious captain, Emily stepped forward, her earlier shame transforming into a newfound respect. "You were amazing, Marcus," she said, her voice steady. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. You showed us all what true leadership looks like." Marcus met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "Thank you, Emily. It's important that we recognize our biases and learn from them." The atmosphere shifted once again as the passengers began to disembark, their experiences intertwining in a tapestry of resilience and hope. Marcus knew that this flight had changed everything, not just for him, but for everyone on board, and as he stepped into the terminal, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to embrace whatever came next. The buzz of the terminal enveloped Marcus Walker as he stepped off the plane, the din of voices a stark contrast to the silence that had reigned in the cockpit moments before. The chaos of the airport felt surreal, a reminder that life moved on even in the face of crisis. As he emerged into the terminal, the applause from the passengers behind him echoed in his ears, a chorus of gratitude that filled him with warmth. He took a moment to collect himself, the adrenaline of the emergency still coursing through his veins. But beneath that exhilaration lay a deeper current, an unshakable sense of purpose. He had not only navigated a potentially catastrophic situation but had also confronted the prejudices that had been directed at him. Today was a turning point, not just for him, but for the people aboard that flight. As he moved away from the gate, Marcus caught sight of the young mother who had expressed her gratitude just moments before. She was now hugging her child tightly, tears still glistening in her eyes. The sight of them reminded him of the importance of his role, not just as a pilot, but as a protector, a leader, and a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. "Mr. Walker," a voice called out, breaking through his thoughts. It was David Martinez, the senior operations manager for the airline, striding toward him with a group of airline officials in tow. "On behalf of the airline, I want to personally thank you for your extraordinary actions today." Marcus shook David's hand firmly, the man's grip a testament to his sincerity. "I'm just glad everyone is safe," Marcus replied, his modesty shining through. David nodded, but his expression grew serious. "You saved lives today. Your quick thinking in the cockpit made all the difference. We're lucky to have had you on board." As they spoke, the gravity of the moment began to settle over Marcus. The incident had highlighted not only his skills as a pilot but the biases and prejudices that still plagued the airline industry. "Thank you, David. I just wish it hadn't taken an emergency for people to recognize what truly matters," he said, his voice steady but laced with conviction. David's brow furrowed in thought. "You're absolutely right. We have a lot of work to do, and I want your input on how we can improve our training and protocols moving forward." "Absolutely," Marcus replied, feeling a sense of responsibility to help foster change. "We need to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, crew members and passengers alike." As they conversed, Marcus noticed Emily lingering nearby, her posture tight and apprehensive. He could sense her uncertainty, but also something deeper, a yearning for growth. After witnessing his actions, she seemed to realize the impact of her previous judgments. "Emily," Marcus said, breaking from the conversation with David, "I'd like to talk to you." Her eyes widened, but she nodded and stepped forward, her heart racing. I just wanted to say thank you, Marcus. You were incredible back there," she stammered, her voice genuine. Marcus studied her for a moment, weighing his words. "I appreciate that. It was a team effort. But I hope you understand that we all have biases that can cloud our judgment. Today was a lesson for all of us." Emily's expression shifted from apprehension to a spark of understanding. "I know I messed up. I let my preconceived notions get in the way. I'm sorry for how I treated you before." Her apology caught him off guard. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, the desire to learn and grow. "Thank you for acknowledging it," he said, his voice calm. "It takes courage to admit mistakes. That's the first step toward change." David, observing the exchange, interjected, "We need more conversations like this within the airline. It's crucial for fostering an inclusive environment." As they continued talking, Marcus felt a shift in Emily, a genuine determination to do better. He recognized the potential for growth not just within her, but for the entire crew. This moment could serve as a catalyst for real change. The bustling terminal around them began to quiet as passengers disembarked, many still looking for answers about what had transpired. Marcus saw the same young mother from before, her child now looking up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Are you a superhero?" the little boy asked, his innocence shining through the tension of the day. Marcus knelt to the boy's level, a smile breaking across his face. No, just a pilot who did his job. But if I can inspire you to follow your dreams, that would be the real superpower. The boy beamed at him, and Marcus felt a swell of hope. This was why he flew, to inspire, to protect, to lead. As he stood back up, he turned to see David and Emily engaged in a serious discussion about implementing new policies. Their energy focused on building a better future. With a sense of fulfillment, Marcus stepped back, allowing them to converse. He felt the weight of the day shifting, morphing into a sense of collective responsibility. They were all in this together, working toward a common goal of change and understanding. Marcus, a voice called from behind. It was Chris, the co-pilot. Can we talk for a minute? Of course, Marcus replied, gesturing for Chris to join him. As they moved aside, Chris's expression was earnest. I just wanted to say how grateful I am for your help today. I don't know what I would have done without you. Don't sell yourself short, Marcus replied, his voice steady. You kept it together while the captain was incapacitated. That's no small feat. We both did what we had to do. Chris nodded, the weight of the day still apparent in his eyes. It's just, today showed me how quickly things can change. I've always wanted to be a pilot. But it's moments like these that make you realize the responsibility we carry. Exactly, Marcus said, feeling a sense of camaraderie. Every flight is a chance to make a difference. We owe it to our passengers to show them our best selves. As they spoke, Marcus's thoughts drifted to the future. This experience had awakened something within him, a desire to effect change. Not just for himself but for others. He envisioned a world where pilots and passengers alike would be judged by their abilities and character, not by the color of their skin or the biases of those around them. The terminal was now filled with passengers heading toward the baggage claim, and the sense of relief permeated the air. As Marcus watched them, he felt a profound sense of responsibility to be part of the solution. Hey, I just got a call from the operations manager, Chris said, interrupting his thoughts. They want to debrief all the crew about what happened. They're serious about making changes. Marcus nodded, determination surging within him. Let's make sure our voices are heard. It's time for real change. With that, they headed toward the debriefing room, ready to transform this experience into a force for good. As they walked side by side, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been a test, but it had also opened the door to something greater, a chance to change the narrative and pave the way for a more inclusive future in the skies. The air in the cockpit was charged with tension as Marcus and Chris prepared for the emergency landing. Marcus's hands gripped the controls firmly, his mind racing through the checklist of procedures that would guide them safely to the ground. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders, not just for the plane but for the lives of everyone on board. Okay, let's go through the landing protocols one more time, Marcus said, his voice steady. He glanced at the altimeter, noting their descent rate. We need to maintain a controlled descent, keep an eye on our speed, and ensure the landing gear is fully deployed before the final approach. Chris nodded, his eyes wide with focus. Right, I'll keep an eye on the instruments and relay any changes. As Marcus began to set the final approach angle, his thoughts drifted to the passengers who had just been through a harrowing experience. He could only imagine the fear they felt during the turbulence, the uncertainty that gripped them as they awaited news from the cockpit. He knew that a calm demeanor would be crucial, not only in the cockpit but in the way they handled the debriefing and interaction with the passengers afterward. Air traffic control. This is Flight 237. Requesting confirmation of our landing clearance, Chris said into the radio, his voice crackling with urgency. Flight 237, you are cleared to land at Newark Liberty International Airport. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Wind conditions are favorable, came the response from the tower. Marcus felt a rush of relief. They had the clearance they needed. Let's do this, he said, a steely determination in his voice. As they approached the runway, Marcus felt every vibration of the aircraft, every gust of wind that threatened to alter their course. The cockpit lights flickered slightly, a reminder of the turbulence that still lingered in the atmosphere. He focused on the glowing runway lights ahead, his heartbeat synchronized with the thrum of the engines. 500 feet, Chris called out, his voice sharp and clear. 400, Marcus responded, adjusting the throttle with precision. 300. The plane shuddered slightly as it hit a pocket of turbulent air, and Marcus instinctively tightened his grip. Stay focused, Chris. We're almost there. 150, 40, 30, 20. Chris's voice rang out, each number a countdown to safety. With a gentle bump, the wheels touched down on the runway, and a wave of applause erupted from the cabin, mingling with the roar of the engines as Marcus deployed the thrust reversers. The sudden deceleration sent a jolt through the aircraft. But Marcus remained calm, guiding the plane toward the designated gate with practiced ease. As they came to a stop, the emergency vehicles began to move into position, their lights flashing brightly against the dimming sky. Marcus took a moment to collect himself, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of the landing. "Nice work, Marcus," Chris said, a mixture of awe and relief in his voice. "You handled that like a pro." "Just doing what needed to be done," Marcus replied, a modest smile creeping onto his face. "Now let's make sure everyone on board is all right." They unbuckled their seatbelts and stepped out of the cockpit, the sounds of the terminal washing over them as they made their way back into the cabin. Emily was already moving through the aisles, her demeanor transformed from apprehension to determination. "How did it go?" she asked as Marcus and Chris joined her. "Smooth landing," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But we need to reassure the passengers and provide them with information. They've been through a lot." As they approached the front of the cabin, Marcus took a deep breath and prepared to address the passengers. The atmosphere was thick with a mix of gratitude and residual anxiety, and he knew that how he spoke in this moment would set the tone for the rest of their experience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd, "I want to personally thank you for your patience and understanding during this flight. I know it was a challenging experience, but I assure you that we are all safe and sound. The emergency services are here to assist anyone who needs help." The passengers nodded, some visibly relaxing at his words. A sense of camaraderie filled the cabin, and Marcus felt a surge of hope. One of the passengers, a young woman with tears in her eyes, raised her hand. "Thank you for saving us. We were so scared." Marcus met her gaze, a reassuring smile on his face. "It's my job to ensure your safety, and I'm grateful that we were able to land without further incident. We are trained for situations like this, and it's a team effort that makes it possible." Emily stood by his side, nodding in agreement. "We're all here to support you," she added, her voice steady. "If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." As they continued to speak with the passengers, Marcus felt a deep sense of connection growing among them. He could see the gratitude in their eyes, the relief flooding their expressions. In that moment, the barriers that had existed before, both personal and societal, began to dissolve. After the initial debriefing, Marcus and the crew guided the passengers toward the terminal. The atmosphere shifted once more, the earlier fear giving way to a shared experience of resilience. As they walked through the bustling terminal, Marcus caught sight of Alex, who was helping another group of passengers gather their belongings. Their eyes met, and Alex offered him a thumbs up, a gesture of solidarity that made Marcus's heart swell with pride. The group of passengers gradually dispersed, but not before expressing their heartfelt thanks to the crew. "You're our heroes," a teenager exclaimed, her voice ringing with enthusiasm. Marcus smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. He wasn't a hero, he was simply a man doing his job. But the experience had opened his eyes to the impact of his actions and the importance of rising above prejudice. As they reached the terminal entrance, the crew gathered for a quick debriefing with David Martinez and other airline officials. "I want to commend each of you for your composure during this emergency," David said, his voice strong. "Today was a reminder of why we must always be prepared. But it also showed the importance of teamwork and understanding." Marcus nodded, knowing that their experience would serve as a catalyst for change within the airline. They would need to address the biases that still lingered, the prejudices that could cloud judgment and impact passenger safety. With newfound determination, Marcus spoke up. "We need to implement comprehensive training focused on diversity and inclusion. It's crucial that we create an environment where all crew members feel valued, and where our passengers know they are safe, regardless of their background." The room fell silent for a moment, and then Chris stepped forward. "I agree. We need to cultivate a culture of respect and understanding. It's time for us to step up and lead by example." Emily added her voice. "I've learned a lot from today, and I want to ensure that my actions reflect a commitment to change." The energy in the room shifted, a sense of purpose sparking among the crew members. Marcus felt a swell of hope, knowing that they were ready to navigate the turbulent waters of change together. As they left the terminal, Marcus glanced back at the plane that had been the stage for such a dramatic sequence of events. It was a silent testament to the power of courage, resilience, and the determination to rise above prejudice. He hoped that their experience would not only lead to changes within the airline but would also ripple outward, inspiring others to confront their biases and strive for a more inclusive world. With each step, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today had tested him in ways he never imagined. But it had also revealed the strength of character that lay within him and his crew. Together, they were ready to forge a new path. One defined by empathy, understanding, and a commitment to making the skies a safer and more inclusive place for all. The cacophony of the terminal faded behind Marcus as he walked toward the debriefing room. A mixture of adrenaline and relief still coursing through him. He had successfully landed the plane. But the real work was just beginning. Today's events had exposed not just the fragility of life, but also the deep-seated biases that could jeopardize it. As he entered the debriefing room, he found David Martinez and several senior executives already seated around a long table. Their expression serious yet filled with gratitude. Marcus exchanged nods with Chris and Emily, who followed him in. The three of them forming an unlikely alliance grounded in their shared experiences from the flight. "Thank you all for coming so quickly," David began, his voice firm and authoritative. "Today was a sobering reminder of the stakes involved in our industry. We need to discuss not only the emergency landing but also how we can prevent incidents like this from happening in the future." Marcus took a seat at the table, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a heavy cloak. "We need to start with comprehensive training on diversity and inclusion," he said, his voice steady. "Today, I was reminded that our biases can cloud our judgment, especially in high-stress situations. We must ensure that every crew member is equipped to recognize and combat those biases." "Absolutely," Chris added, leaning forward in his seat. "We need to cultivate an environment where all crew members feel empowered to speak up, regardless of the circumstances. If we don't address this at every level, we risk jeopardizing not only our passengers' safety but also the integrity of our organization." Emily nodded in agreement, her earlier apprehension replaced with a fierce determination. "I want to do my part as well. I'll work to implement changes within our training modules, ensuring they focus on real scenarios that encourage empathy and understanding." David glanced around the room, clearly impressed by the commitment of the crew. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we need. It's time for us to lead by example. I want each of you to be involved in developing this training program, not just as a way to educate others but as a way to foster a culture of respect within our organization." The conversation flowed freely as they brainstormed ideas and strategies, the atmosphere in the room shifting from tension to camaraderie. Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose as he contributed to the discussion, his earlier experiences fueling his passion for change. Hours passed, and the sun began to set outside, casting a golden glow through the windows of the conference room. As they wrapped up their meeting, David turned to Marcus, Chris, and Emily. "I want to thank you for your bravery today. You've shown us that true leadership is not just about handling emergencies but also about confronting the issues that lead to those emergencies." Marcus felt a swell of pride at the acknowledgement. "It's a team effort, David. We all play a part in shaping the culture of this airline. We need to ensure that everyone feels valued and respected, not just within the cockpit but throughout the entire organization." With the meeting adjourned, Marcus and his colleagues left the room, a sense of resolve propelling them forward. As they stepped into the bustling terminal, the energy of the airport surrounded them, a reminder that life was resuming its normal rhythm. "Hey, Marcus," a familiar voice called out. It was Alex, rushing toward them with a bright smile. "I just wanted to say thank you again for everything. You really stepped up back there." Marcus returned the smile, feeling a warmth spread through him. "It was a team effort, Alex. I couldn't have done it without you and the rest of the crew." As they chatted, Marcus's gaze drifted across the terminal, landing on the young mother and her child from the flight. They were standing by the baggage claim, the boy clutching a toy plane and looking up at his mother with wide-eyed wonder. The mother caught Marcus's eye and approached, her expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you for everything," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved us today. My son keeps talking about how cool it was to have a real pilot on board." Marcus knelt down to the boy's level, a grin spreading across his face. "I'm glad you're safe. Remember, you can be anything you want to be, even a pilot someday." The boy's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I want to fly planes just like you," he exclaimed, bouncing on his heels. Marcus's heart swelled at the boy's enthusiasm. "Then you better start studying and practicing." He stood back up, exchanging a smile with the mother. "Your actions today have inspired him," she said softly, her eyes shining with appreciation. "You turned a scary moment into a lesson about bravery." As they parted ways, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about flying, it was about making a difference, shaping the next generation, and inspiring others to rise above their biases. With that thought in mind, he turned back to Chris and Emily, who were engaged in animated conversation about the upcoming training sessions. "Let's make sure we put our hearts into this," he said, joining them. "If we're going to change the culture, we need to start with ourselves." Emily nodded, her expression resolute. "Absolutely. This isn't just a project, it's a commitment to each other and to our passengers." As they headed toward the exit, the weight of the day began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. Marcus could feel the tides of change turning, and he was ready to be part of it. The cool evening air greeted them as they stepped outside, a refreshing breeze that felt like a new beginning. The airport, illuminated by the glow of the setting sun, seemed to pulse with energy, a reminder that every ending was merely the start of something new. As they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus knew this day had changed everything for him. He had navigated not just an emergency but also a journey of growth and understanding. Together with his crew, he was ready to forge ahead, determined to create a legacy that would inspire future generations and challenge the norms of their industry. The sky stretched above them, vast and inviting, a reminder that the horizon was limitless. And so were their possibilities. Today had been a testament to resilience, a stepping stone toward a brighter future. Marcus took a deep breath, embracing the promise of tomorrow and the adventures yet to come. The following weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity as the airline began implementing the changes that Marcus, Emily, Chris, and the rest of the crew had proposed. The sense of urgency that had gripped the airline in the wake of the emergency landing had transformed into a committed effort toward fostering an inclusive environment. Marcus felt a renewed purpose as he poured his energy into the training programs, eager to share his experiences and lessons learned with his colleagues. One afternoon, as he sat in the conference room preparing for a presentation, Marcus reflected on the profound impact that day had had on him. The flight had not only tested his skills as a pilot but had also forced him to confront the biases that often went unexamined in the airline industry. He was determined to ensure that no one else would have to endure the kind of prejudice he had faced at the hands of Emily. As he shuffled through his notes, Emily entered the room, her expression serious. "Hey, Marcus," she said, closing the door behind her. "Can we talk?" "Of course," Marcus replied, looking up from his papers. He noticed the tension in her posture and gestured for her to take a seat. "What's on your mind?" Emily took a deep breath, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "I've been thinking a lot about our training sessions and the way I treated you before the flight. I've realized that it wasn't just a one-time incident. It's part of a larger pattern, one that I need to address within myself." Marcus nodded, appreciating her willingness to confront her past actions. "It takes courage to recognize that, Emily. A lot of people go their entire lives without examining their biases." "I know," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I've spent so much time justifying my assumptions about people, thinking I knew better based on appearances. But what I did to you was unacceptable. You saved our lives, and I let my prejudices cloud my judgment. I'm sorry." "Thank you for saying that," Marcus replied, his tone steady. "Apologies are important, but what matters more is what we do moving forward. It's about taking action and making a commitment to change." Emily's eyes sparkled with determination. "I want to help lead this change. I've been thinking about how I can use my position as a flight attendant to advocate for passengers who might feel marginalized or overlooked. I want to be a voice for those who are afraid to speak up." Marcus felt a swell of pride at her words. "That's a great step forward, Emily. It's essential to create a culture where everyone feels safe and respected. But it also requires ongoing education and a willingness to listen and learn. I've been reaching out to some diversity trainers and experts," she said, her enthusiasm growing. "I want to develop workshops for the entire crew, workshops that not only focus on awareness but also on practical strategies for confronting bias when we see it." "Count me in," Marcus said, a smile spreading across his face. "We can work together to create a program that truly resonates with everyone on the team. It'll be a collaborative effort." As they delved into planning the training, Marcus felt a shift occurring, not just within Emily, but also in himself. He was learning the power of forgiveness, of allowing others the chance to grow and change. It was a reminder that everyone, regardless of their past, could contribute to a more equitable future. Weeks passed, and the training sessions began to take shape. Marcus and Emily worked tirelessly alongside Chris, each contributing their unique perspectives to create a comprehensive program. They brought in speakers from diverse backgrounds, shared personal stories, and fostered open dialogues about bias and prejudice. The day of the first training session arrived, and Marcus stood at the front of the room, a sense of excitement buzzing in the air. The crew gathered. A mix of familiar faces and new ones. All eager to participate in the transformative experience ahead. Thank you all for being here. Marcus began. His voice resonating with conviction. Today is about more than just awareness, it's about action and commitment. We're here to challenge ourselves. To confront the biases that may lie beneath the surface. And to learn how to create a culture of respect and understanding. Emily stepped forward. Her confidence evident as she addressed the group. I want to share my story. Not as an excuse, but as an example of how easy it is to let assumptions dictate our actions. We all have biases, some conscious, some unconscious. The important thing is that we acknowledge them and take steps to do better. The room fell silent as Emily shared her experience. Her vulnerability creating a palpable connection among the crew. Marcus watched as their eyes widened. Many nodding in understanding as they began to see the complexities of their own biases reflected in her story. After Emily finished, Chris led a discussion, encouraging everyone to share their thoughts and experiences. The conversation flowed, each crew member contributing, sharing moments of discomfort and realization. The atmosphere transformed into one of empathy and support, a powerful reminder that they were all in this together. As the session progressed, Marcus felt the energy shift. The crew was no longer just passive participants, they were engaged. Invested in the future they were creating together. The discussions grew deeper, sparking conversations about how they could take action both on and off the plane. Toward the end of the session, Marcus introduced an exercise that required each member to reflect on their own biases and think about how they could actively confront them in their daily lives. The room was filled with a buzz of realization as they began to grasp the impact their actions could have on others. Remember, it's not just about what we say but what we do, Marcus reminded them. A sense of hope swelling in his chest. Every small action counts. And together we can create a culture where everyone feels valued. As the training session concluded, the crew left with a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just flight attendants, they were advocates for change, committed to ensuring that every passenger felt respected and safe. As Marcus watched them filter out of the room, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was just the beginning. They had taken the first steps toward addressing the biases that had lingered in the shadows for too long. Marcus turned to Emily and Chris, a smile breaking across his face. Today was a success. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. Emily grinned back, her eyes shining with determination. And this is just the start. We have so much more to do. Chris nodded in agreement, a newfound fire igniting within him. Let's keep this momentum going. We can make a real difference. As they stood together, united in their mission, Marcus felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. They were not only confronting their pasts but also paving the way for a more inclusive and respectful airline culture. The horizon ahead was filled with promise. And together, they would rise to the occasion, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. As the sun rose over Newark Liberty International Airport, casting a warm glow across the tarmac, Marcus Walker felt a sense of anticipation coursing through him. Today marked the launch of their new diversity and inclusion training program. And the excitement in the air was palpable. The team had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment. And he knew it was going to be a turning point for the airline. In the conference room, the atmosphere buzzed with energy as crew members mingled and exchanged ideas. Marcus surveyed the gathering, noting the diverse mix of faces, seasoned pilots, flight attendants, and ground staff, all united by a shared goal of fostering change. He felt a swell of pride at how far they had come since that fateful flight. Good morning, everyone, Marcus called out as he took his place at the front of the room, his voice cutting through the chatter. The crowd began to quiet, eager to hear what he had to say. I'm thrilled to see all of you here today. This program is about more than just training, it's about creating a culture where everyone feels respected, valued, and safe. Today, we embark on a journey together to challenge our assumptions and embrace the diversity that makes us stronger. A ripple of applause filled the room, and Marcus felt his confidence surge. He glanced at Emily, who stood at the ready beside him, her expression one of determination. She had become an integral part of the training team, and he was grateful for her contributions and passion. Before we dive in, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker, Emily said, stepping forward. We're honored to have Lisa Thompson with us today, a renowned diversity consultant who has worked with organizations across the country to implement inclusive practices. The crowd erupted in applause as Lisa made her way to the front, her presence commanding and warm. Thank you for having me, she began, her voice smooth and inviting. Today, I want to talk about the importance of empathy in the workplace. Empathy allows us to connect with one another on a deeper level. to understand experiences beyond our own, and to foster an environment where everyone feels they belong. As Lisa spoke, Marcus watched the crew members lean forward in their seats, hanging on her every word. She shared poignant stories from her own experiences, highlighting moments when empathy had changed the course of individuals' lives and transformed workplace cultures. The room was charged with emotion, and he could see the impact her words had on his colleagues. After Lisa finished, the discussion opened up, and Marcus encouraged everyone to share their thoughts and experiences. "What does empathy mean to you?" he prompted, looking around the room. A senior flight attendant raised her hand. "I think empathy is about listening," she said, her voice steady. "It's about making space for others to express themselves without judgment." Another colleague chimed in. "It's also about recognizing that we all have different backgrounds and experiences. What might seem small to one person can be monumental to another." As the discussion flowed, Marcus felt a sense of hope and camaraderie building among the crew. They were no longer just colleagues, they were allies in a shared mission to create a more inclusive environment. As the morning progressed, they engaged in interactive exercises that challenged their biases and encouraged them to see things from different perspectives. Marcus guided the group through role-playing scenarios, allowing them to step into each other's shoes. Laughter and thoughtful discussions filled the room as they navigated complex situations, fostering an atmosphere of trust and openness. At the lunch break, the crew gathered around tables, sharing their thoughts on the morning sessions. Marcus moved from table to table, encouraging conversations and listening to their insights. The energy in the room was infectious, a blend of excitement and determination. "Today is just the beginning," he reminded them. "We need to carry this momentum forward into our daily lives, both in the cockpit and on the ground. Let's make it our mission to be advocates for change, not just during training sessions, but every day." As the afternoon sessions began, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had covered so much ground already, and he knew the training was making an impact. But he also knew that true change required ongoing commitment and action beyond this one day. Toward the end of the training, Emily stepped up to the front again. "We've covered a lot today, and I want to end with a challenge for all of us," she said, her voice firm. "I challenge each of you to identify one bias in your life that you're willing to confront. It can be small or large, but I want you to commit to taking action to change it. Let's hold each other accountable." The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt the energy shift once more. It was a call to arms, a reminder that everyone had a role to play in creating a more inclusive future. As they wrapped up the training, Marcus took a moment to reflect on the journey they had all embarked on. It hadn't been easy, it had required confronting uncomfortable truths and examining the biases that often lay beneath the surface. But today had been a testament to the power of empathy, collaboration, and determination. As the crew began to disperse, Marcus spotted Alex approaching. "Hey, I just wanted to say how inspiring today was," Alex said, his enthusiasm evident. "I feel like we're really going to make a difference." "Absolutely," Marcus replied, a smile breaking across his face. "And it's only the beginning. We have the power to change the culture here, and I believe we can do it." As they continued to chat, Marcus felt a sense of hope swell within him. They were all in this together, and with each small step they took, they were charting a course toward a more inclusive future. As the sun began to set outside the airport, casting a warm glow through the windows, Marcus knew that the winds of change were blowing, and together, they would navigate those winds, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The weeks following the launch of the Diversity and Inclusion Training Program were filled with energy and optimism. Marcus Walker, now a driving force behind the initiative, felt invigorated by the positive feedback and the momentum building among the airline crew. Each session brought new insights, deeper conversations, and a shared commitment to change that was palpable. But as the season shifted into late fall, so did the dynamics of the airline. The bustling terminal, usually filled with laughter and anticipation, began to hum with whispers of discontent. Reports of tensions among the staff surfaced, and the pressure on management to ensure safety and satisfaction for passengers increased dramatically. One afternoon, as Marcus reviewed the feedback from the latest training sessions, Emily knocked on the door and stepped in, her expression tense. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, her voice low. "What's going on?" he asked, sensing her urgency. "It's about the crew morale," she began, crossing her arms tightly across her chest. "There's been some pushback from a few staff members about the changes we've been implementing. Some are resistant to the training and the conversations we've been having." Marcus leaned back in his chair, digesting her words. "What kind of pushback?" Are we talking about resistance to the training itself or something more personal? Both, I think. Emily replied, her brow furrowing. Some crew members feel like they're being unfairly scrutinized or that their experiences are being dismissed. There's this undercurrent of frustration. And I'm worried it could escalate. Have you spoken to anyone directly about this? Marcus asked, feeling a sense of urgency swell within him. I've tried to engage in conversations. But it's clear some are unwilling to listen, she admitted. Exhaling sharply. I think we need to address this head-on before it becomes a bigger issue. Marcus nodded, his mind racing. We need to create a safe space for dialogue. If there's discontent brewing, we can't ignore it. Let's organize a meeting with the crew to discuss their concerns. We can't move forward effectively if we don't address their feelings and experiences. Emily's eyes brightened at the suggestion. That's a great idea. A roundtable discussion could provide a platform for everyone to express their thoughts and help us better understand their perspectives. Exactly. We can't force change, we have to invite it. Marcus said, determination hardening in his voice. Let's schedule something for later this week. Over the next few days, Marcus and Emily worked diligently to prepare for the meeting. They reached out to the crew, ensuring everyone felt welcome and encouraged to participate. They knew this would be a pivotal moment, one that could either solidify their progress or set them back significantly. When the day of the meeting arrived, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The conference room buzzed with chatter as crew members gathered, and he could sense the tension lingering in the air. As everyone settled in, he stood at the front, ready to guide the conversation. Thank you all for coming today. Marcus began, his voice resonating through the room. We're here to foster an open dialogue about the changes we're implementing and to hear your thoughts and concerns. This is a safe space, and I encourage everyone to speak freely. As he spoke, he could see a few familiar faces frowning, their skepticism apparent. But he pushed forward, determined to create an atmosphere of honesty and understanding. Emily took the lead, addressing the room with warmth. We know that change can be uncomfortable, and it often brings up a lot of emotions. We want to hear from you, what's working, what's not, and how we can support you in this process. The first voice came from a seasoned flight attendant, her arms crossed defensively. I feel like this whole initiative is unnecessary. We've always done our jobs well. Why do we need this extra scrutiny now? Marcus leaned in, choosing his words carefully. We understand that many of you have done amazing work over the years. Our goal isn't to diminish that but to enhance our workplace culture so everyone feels valued and included. This isn't just about training, it's about creating a safer environment for all of us. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. But there were still a few dissenting voices. Another attendant chimed in. But what if I don't see things the way you do? What if I disagree with the focus on bias? Am I going to be labeled as part of the problem? Marcus sensed the defensiveness rising and quickly interjected. This isn't about labeling anyone, it's about understanding that we all come from different backgrounds and experiences. What we want is for everyone to engage in a respectful dialogue where we can learn from one another. No one will be judged for their perspective. But we need to address our biases to grow together. As the discussion continued, more voices joined in, some expressing their concerns, others sharing their experiences of feeling marginalized or overlooked. It was a powerful moment of vulnerability that began to shift the atmosphere in the room. One young flight attendant shared her story of being dismissed during a previous training session. I felt like my voice didn't matter because I was new. It's intimidating to speak up when it seems like the same people dominate the conversation. Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of empathy. Thank you for sharing that. It's crucial for all of us to recognize that every voice matters, especially those that have been silenced. We need to ensure everyone feels empowered to contribute. As the conversation flowed, the tension began to dissipate. Crew members began to share their personal stories, and the dialogue transformed from defensive to collaborative. There was laughter. There were moments of realization, and an increasing sense of camaraderie began to blossom. Maybe we should have these discussions more regularly, one veteran pilot suggested. Open forums could help us air our grievances and learn from each other. Yes, another attendant agreed. Having a safe space to express ourselves would make a huge difference. Marcus felt a sense of hope swell within him. That's an excellent idea. We can establish regular check-ins to foster ongoing communication and ensure everyone feels heard. Let's make this a priority. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus looked around the room, seeing the shift in energy. The crew members were no longer just colleagues, they were a community working toward a common goal. They had confronted their fears, their biases, and emerged stronger for it. "Thank you all for your honesty and vulnerability today," Marcus said, his voice steady and sincere. "This is just the beginning of our journey. Together, we can create an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to be their authentic selves." As the crew members filed out of the room, many stopped to express their gratitude. Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose as he watched them engage with one another, sharing stories and laughter, a stark contrast to the tension that had filled the air before. That night, as Marcus reflected on the day, he felt a sense of accomplishment. They had taken a significant step forward in addressing the issues that had plagued their airline, and he knew they were on the right path. But he also understood that change would not happen overnight. There would be challenges ahead, turbulence that could shake their resolve. But as he looked around at the camaraderie blossoming among his colleagues, he felt a deep sense of hope. Together, they could weather any storm and navigate the winds of change, creating a future that honored every individual's experience. With that thought in mind, Marcus settled into bed, ready to face whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But he was ready. They were ready. And together, they would rise above, soaring toward a brighter, more inclusive horizon. As winter settled over Newark, the air turned crisp and cold, and the days grew shorter. The holiday season was just around the corner, and the airport buzzed with activity as travelers rushed to catch flights to reunite with family and friends. Amidst the excitement, however, there was an undercurrent of tension within the airline, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Marcus Walker could feel it, too, though he had worked tirelessly to foster a culture of inclusivity and understanding. He sensed that not everyone was on board with the changes. Rumors of dissent echoed in the break room, and the atmosphere among some crew members was charged with frustration and resentment. One afternoon, as Marcus prepared for a flight, he overheard a couple of attendants talking just outside the cockpit door. Their voices were hushed but filled with palpable disdain. "Can you believe all this diversity nonsense? It's like they think we can't do our jobs unless they hold our hands," one of them scoffed. "Exactly. I've been flying for 20 years. What do they know that I don't?" another replied, their tone laced with bitterness. Marcus's heart sank. It was disheartening to hear such dismissive attitudes about the very initiatives he had worked so hard to implement. He understood that change was difficult, but he had hoped that the training sessions would have fostered more understanding. As he walked past them, he decided to intervene. "Hey, can we talk about this?" he said, approaching the group with a measured tone. The attendants exchanged wary glances but nodded, stepping aside to allow Marcus to join them. "Look, I understand that change can be frustrating," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But the initiatives we've introduced are designed to help us all do our jobs better and create a safer environment for everyone." "Safer?" the first attendant scoffed. "We've always managed just fine. This is just a waste of time and resources." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their skepticism. "I know many of you have years of experience and have done great work. But think of it this way, diversity isn't just about checking boxes. It's about recognizing the strengths that come from different backgrounds and perspectives. It can only make us better." The second attendant crossed her arms defensively. "You make it sound like we're all racists or something. That's not fair." "Of course not," Marcus replied gently. "But we all have biases we need to confront. I'm asking for your help in this. We can only move forward if we're willing to have these conversations openly." The attendants shifted their weight, the tension hanging in the air. Marcus could see the cracks forming in their defenses. But it would take more than words to change their minds. "Let's do something," he suggested, his voice firm yet inviting. "Why don't we hold a casual meeting? Just us? No formal agenda, just a chance to air grievances and discuss what we can do to support each other through this transition." The first attendant narrowed his eyes, skepticism still etched on his face. "And you think that will change anything?" "Maybe not right away," Marcus admitted. "But it's a start. If we can't talk to one another, how can we build the trust we need to move forward?" After a moment of silence, the second attendant nodded slowly. "All right, I'm willing to give it a shot. But it needs to be real, no sugarcoating." "Agreed," Marcus said, relief washing over him. "Let's plan something for next week. I'll send out an invitation." As they parted ways, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. He knew that the path to change would be fraught with challenges, but engaging in open dialogue was crucial. If they could confront their fears and biases together, it would foster a stronger, more united crew. Later that week, the weather turned as a winter storm swept through the region, grounding flights and causing delays. The airport buzzed with a mixture of frustration and excitement as passengers adjusted their travel plans, hoping to reach their destinations in time for the holidays. In the midst of the chaos, Marcus prepared for a flight scheduled to leave just before the storm hit. He and the crew had already faced a series of delays and cancellations, and the tension in the air was palpable. He could sense the unease among the attendants, but he remained focused on keeping the atmosphere calm and professional. As they boarded the plane, Marcus noticed a familiar face, one of the attendants from the earlier conversation. She was standing by the emergency exit, her expression tense as she double-checked the safety equipment. He approached her, wanting to foster a connection in the midst of the turmoil. "Hey, how are you holding up?" he asked, his voice warm and inviting. "Just trying to get through the day," she replied. Her tone clipped. "I'm not sure how this flight is going to go with the weather turning." "I know it's tough right now," Marcus said, nodding empathetically. "But remember, we're all in this together. If we communicate and support one another, we can manage anything that comes our way." As they prepared for takeoff, Marcus felt the plane shudder against the wind. The pilots in the cockpit communicated with air traffic control, and the crew went through their safety checks. Tension hung in the air as passengers settled into their seats, eyes wide with anticipation. Once airborne, the turbulence began. The plane rocked and rolled, and the cabin filled with nervous murmurs. Marcus could sense the anxiety among the crew as they navigated the bumpy ride. "All right, everyone," he said, projecting confidence through the intercom. "We're experiencing some turbulence, but I assure you we're trained to handle this. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened." In the back of the cabin, Marcus noticed the same attendant from earlier struggling to maintain her composure as she assisted passengers. He felt a surge of determination to support her, knowing how important it was for the crew to stay united during challenging moments. As they hit a particularly rough patch, he quickly moved to her side, speaking in a low voice. "You've got this. Just take a deep breath and keep moving. Focus on one passenger at a time." She nodded, her expression softening as she steadied herself. "Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate the support." They continued to move through the cabin together, helping passengers who were uneasy and offering reassurance where needed. Marcus felt the bond between them strengthen as they worked in sync, their earlier conversation lingering in the background. After a harrowing 30 minutes, the turbulence began to subside, and the plane steadied. As they approached their destination, a wave of relief washed over the crew and passengers alike. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," came the voice over the intercom. "We're beginning our descent into Newark, and the weather looks clear. Thank you for your patience during the turbulence, and we'll be on the ground shortly." As the plane touched down safely, a cheer erupted from the passengers, and Marcus felt a swell of pride wash over him. He glanced at the attendant who had been struggling earlier, and she smiled back at him, the tension of the flight dissipating. "See? We did it," he said, his tone light. "Yeah, we did," she replied, a spark of camaraderie igniting between them. As they prepared for the passengers to disembark, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been a test of resilience, unity, and empathy. He understood now more than ever that confronting their biases and fears was an ongoing journey, and they would face it together. But as they stepped into the terminal, a new storm loomed on the horizon, one that would challenge everything they had worked to achieve. In the midst of the bustling crowd, Marcus spotted a familiar face, a news reporter setting up a camera crew to cover the airline's recent changes. His heart sank. Would the media scrutiny reignite tensions within the crew? Would they be able to maintain the progress they had made? Or would outside pressures threaten to unravel their hard-earned unity? As he watched the reporter begin to speak into the camera, he knew that whatever happened next would test their resolve. But Marcus was ready. They had faced storms before, and together, they would rise above once more. The lights of Newark Liberty International Airport twinkled like stars in the evening sky as Marcus Walker stepped into the terminal. The energy of the airport was palpable, but as he walked through the bustling crowd, a sense of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. The news crew had gathered, cameras rolling, ready to report on the recent changes at the airline. "Marcus, over here," a voice called out, and he turned to see Lisa Thompson, the diversity consultant, waving him over. She was surrounded by reporters, her demeanor poised and professional. "Hey, Lisa," Marcus said, approaching her with a cautious smile. "What's going on?" "We're doing a follow-up piece on the diversity initiatives," she explained, her tone upbeat but serious. "They want to interview you about the progress and how the crew is responding to the training sessions." Marcus hesitated, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over him. I'm not sure that's a good idea. There's still a lot of tension among the staff. I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I understand your concerns. But this is an opportunity to highlight the positive changes and the commitment to inclusivity. Lisa insisted, her eyes bright with determination. We can steer the narrative toward the benefits of the program and how it's impacting the crew and passengers. He weighed her words carefully. While he wanted to promote the positive aspects of their initiatives, he was acutely aware of the lingering discontent within the airline. Okay, but I think we need to address the challenges, too. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Agreed, Lisa replied, nodding earnestly. I think your honesty will resonate with viewers. Let's show that this is an ongoing journey and that it requires effort from everyone. With a deep breath, Marcus nodded, steeling himself for the interview. They moved toward the cameras, and he felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Ready? Lisa asked, offering him a reassuring smile. Let's do it, Marcus said, straightening his posture. As the cameras rolled, the lead reporter introduced the segment. We're here at Newark Liberty International Airport, where changes are underway at one of the leading airlines in the country. We have Marcus Walker, a senior pilot who has been instrumental in implementing new diversity initiatives within the crew. The reporter turned to him, microphone in hand. Marcus, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us how the recent training sessions have impacted your crew and the airline as a whole? Thank you for having me, Marcus began, feeling the adrenaline surge through him. The training sessions have been a transformative experience for many of us. They've opened up conversations about biases, empathy, and the importance of inclusivity in our workplace. While there are still challenges to face, I believe we're making strides toward a more supportive environment. The reporter nodded, encouraging him to continue. And what challenges have you faced since implementing these changes? Change is difficult for anyone, and it's natural for some crew members to feel apprehensive, Marcus admitted. There have been concerns about how these initiatives affect our roles and responsibilities. It's important for us to acknowledge those feelings and work through them together. As he spoke, Marcus caught a glimpse of a few crew members lingering at the edge of the crowd, their expressions unreadable. He could sense the tension simmering beneath the surface, and he hoped his words would resonate positively rather than ignite further dissent. Some critics argue that these initiatives create divisions rather than foster unity, the reporter pressed, her gaze unwavering. How do you respond to those concerns? Marcus paused, considering his answer carefully. I think it's essential to recognize that diversity and inclusion are not about division, they're about embracing our differences and learning from one another. The goal is to build a culture where everyone feels valued and heard. It's a journey, and it requires openness and commitment from all of us. The reporter smiled, nodding thoughtfully. That's a powerful perspective, Marcus. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. As the interview concluded, Marcus stepped away from the cameras, a mixture of relief and apprehension washing over him. He hoped he had struck the right balance in addressing the challenges while promoting the importance of inclusivity. Great job, Lisa said, her enthusiasm infectious. You really captured the essence of what we're trying to achieve. I believe this will resonate with the public. Marcus forced a smile, still feeling the weight of the situation. Thanks, Lisa. But I can't shake the feeling that we still have a long way to go. As they walked back through the terminal, Marcus spotted a group of crew members gathered around a television screen, watching the segment. His stomach churned with apprehension as he approached, ready to confront the reality of the situation. Did you see that? One of the attendants exclaimed, pointing to the screen. What's this about? We didn't agree to have our struggles broadcasted like this. Marcus stepped forward, his heart racing. Hey, everyone. Let's talk about it. I understand that you might feel uncomfortable with what was said, but the intention was to promote the changes we're working toward, not to undermine anyone's experience. Another attendant chimed in, frustration evident in her voice. It feels like we're being put on display for our problems instead of being acknowledged for our hard work. I'm tired of feeling like we're the problem. I get that, Marcus replied, trying to remain calm. But we can't ignore the issues we're facing. If we want to create a better environment, we have to address the discomfort that comes with change. The conversation escalated, voices rising in frustration. The unease that had lingered beneath the surface began to boil over, threatening to unravel the progress they had made. Enough, Marcus said, raising his voice to regain control. This isn't helping. We need to approach this together. Let's have a meeting where we can discuss our feelings and concerns openly. We need to create a space where everyone can express their thoughts without fear of backlash. As murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. He knew that navigating this storm wouldn't be easy, but it was crucial to confront the tensions head-on. Later that evening, as Marcus prepared for his flight, he reflected on the day's events. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was determined to ensure that every voice was heard and valued. Change required patience, understanding, and a willingness to engage in uncomfortable conversations. As he took to the skies once more, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The turbulence of the day mirrored the unsettled atmosphere among the crew, but he was ready to navigate the storm, to lead with empathy and understanding, and to ensure that together they would rise above the challenges ahead. In the cockpit, as he guided the plane through the clouds, Marcus took a deep breath and steeled himself for the journey. The winds of change were blowing, and he was committed to steering them toward a brighter, more inclusive future. The storm had rolled in with a ferocity that echoed the tension within the airline. As Marcus Walker navigated through the skies, he could feel the turbulence beneath him, a reminder of the tumultuous atmosphere that awaited him back on the ground. The flight was uneventful, a standard journey through the cloudy skies. Yet, the whispers of discontent among the crew weighed heavily on Marcus's mind. The recent news segment had only exacerbated the underlying issues, igniting a fire that had been simmering beneath the surface. As they prepared for landing, Marcus noticed his co-pilot, Sam, tapping nervously on the controls. "You all right?" Marcus asked, glancing over at him. "Just a bit on edge, I guess," Sam admitted, wiping his brow. "With everything going on, I feel like we're walking on eggshells around here." "I get it," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "But we can't let fear dictate our actions. We need to support each other through this. We're all in it together." With a final glance at the controls, Marcus focused on the descent, his hands steady on the yoke. He knew that the challenges they faced as a crew were not just about the immediate issues at hand but also about the long-term implications for their work environment. As the wheels touched down on the runway, a wave of relief washed over him. They had made it safely to the ground. But the true test awaited them in the terminal. Upon exiting the plane, Marcus found a crowd of crew members gathered around the flight deck, animated voices mingling with the sound of luggage rolling across the floor. He sensed the energy shift as he approached, a mix of curiosity and apprehension hanging in the air. "Did you see the news again?" one attendant asked, her voice sharp. "They're making it sound like we're all a bunch of bigots." "Yeah. It's ridiculous," another chimed in. "We're just doing our jobs. Why do they have to keep focusing on our flaws?" Marcus stepped forward, raising his hands to calm the gathering. "Listen. I know tensions are high right now, but we need to address this as a team. Let's schedule a meeting where we can talk about how we're feeling and what we can do to move forward." "Move forward?" one attendant scoffed. "How can we move forward when the entire airline is under scrutiny?" "I understand your frustrations," Marcus said, his voice firm yet empathetic. "But the scrutiny isn't going away. We can either let it tear us apart or we can band together and show them who we really are. This is our chance to turn this narrative around." The crew members exchanged glances, some appearing unconvinced while others nodded. Considering his words, Marcus could feel the weight of their experiences bearing down on him. But he refused to let their fear overwhelm him. As they discussed potential meeting times, Marcus caught sight of Chris standing at the back of the crowd, his expression serious. "Marcus," Chris called out, breaking through the chatter. "What happens if we don't make progress? If this continues, it could affect our flights and morale even more." "We have to be proactive," Marcus replied, feeling the urgency of the situation. "We can't ignore the issues. If we want to create a better workplace, we need to communicate openly and honestly. It's not going to be easy, but it's necessary." With a collective nod, the crew agreed to set a meeting for the following week. As they dispersed, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. They were willing to confront their challenges head-on, and that was a step in the right direction. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus and his team worked diligently to prepare for the meeting, crafting an agenda that encouraged open dialogue while addressing the tensions that had arisen. He reached out to crew members individually, encouraging them to voice their concerns and perspectives. As the meeting approached, Marcus felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He knew that this was a pivotal moment for the airline, a chance to turn their struggles into a shared mission. On the day of the meeting, the conference room was filled with a palpable tension. Crew members arrived, their expressions a mix of apprehension and resolve. Marcus stood at the front, ready to guide them through what he hoped would be a transformative conversation. Thank you all for being here, he began. His voice steady. I know these past weeks have been challenging. And I want to create a safe space where we can share our thoughts and feelings openly. This isn't about blame, it's about understanding and growth. The room fell silent as he encouraged anyone who wished to speak to share their experiences. A veteran flight attendant was the first to raise her hand. I've been flying for decades. And I've never seen such scrutiny on our work. It feels like we're under a microscope. And it's exhausting. I feel the same way, another crew member chimed in. We're all professionals here. And I don't think it's fair for our work to be questioned constantly. Marcus nodded, acknowledging their concerns. I hear you. And I understand that the scrutiny can feel overwhelming. But this is our opportunity to show that we're committed to improving and that we can learn from these challenges. As the discussion continued, more crew members began to share their feelings of frustration and fear. But amidst the discontent, a shift began to occur. They started to acknowledge their shared experiences, revealing stories of moments when they had felt marginalized or overlooked, times when their voices had not been heard. As the meeting progressed, Marcus felt the atmosphere begin to change. The crew members were no longer just expressing anger, they were learning to listen to one another and recognize the complexities of their shared experiences. Maybe we should have regular meetings like this, one young attendant suggested. It would give us a chance to keep the lines of communication open. I agree, another chimed in. If we can create a space where we can be honest with each other, it will help us build trust. With each passing moment, Marcus could see the camaraderie growing among the crew. They were no longer divided by fear or frustration, they were united in their commitment to improvement and understanding. As the meeting came to a close, Marcus felt a sense of pride swell within him. They had turned a difficult situation into an opportunity for growth and unity. Thank you all for your honesty and vulnerability today, he said, his voice resonating with gratitude. We're on a journey together. And I'm proud to be on this path with all of you. Let's continue to support each other and push forward. As the crew members filed out of the room, Marcus exchanged smiles and words of encouragement with his colleagues. They were a team, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The storm may have brought turbulence, but it had also brought clarity. Marcus knew that they were only just beginning. But with every conversation and every connection, they were forging a brighter future together. With renewed determination, Marcus left the meeting feeling hopeful. They had confronted their struggles, and now they were prepared to navigate the path ahead, together. As a united crew,